I walked into that wedding reception worth $3 billion, wearing a custom dress that cost more than most people's cars. But when I saw him across the room, the man who destroyed my heart 10 years ago, all that money couldn't protect me from what happened next. My name is Jasmine, and I'm 35 years old. Today, I run Connect Local, a social media platform that helps small businesses find their customers. We have over 50 million users worldwide, and Forbes just put me on their cover as one of the most influential entrepreneurs under 40. But 10 years ago, I was a completely different person. I was broke, heartbroken, and sleeping on my best friend's couch, wondering if I'd ever trust anyone again. You see, success has a funny way of rewriting your story. People look at me now and think I've always had it figured out. They see the penthouse apartment, the private jet, the charity galas. They don't see the nights I cried myself to sleep, building my company with nothing but determination and a laptop that barely worked. They don't know about the man who almost destroyed everything before it even began. It started 3 weeks ago when the invitation came in the mail. Thick, cream-colored paper with gold lettering. Lisa Martinez was getting married, and she wanted me to be there. Lisa had been my rock through everything: the divorce, the early days of my business when I was eating ramen noodles for dinner and wondering if I was crazy for believing in my dream. I stared at that invitation for a long time. Part of me wanted to go to celebrate my best friend who deserved all the happiness in the world. But another part of me, the part that still remembered what it felt like to have your whole world fall apart, whispered warnings in my ear. Lisa had been friends with both of us back then. There was always a chance he might be there. I called Lisa that same evening. "Hey girl, congratulations on the engagement. I'm so happy for you," I said, trying to keep my voice light. There was a pause on the other end, and I just knew. "Jasmine," she said softly, "I need to tell you something. I sent David an invitation too. I know it's complicated, but we were all friends once and I didn't want to choose sides." My heart started racing, but I forced myself to breathe. "It's your wedding, Lisa. You invite whoever you want." But after I hung up, I sat in my living room for hours, staring out at the city lights, wondering if I was strong enough to face the past. David and I got married when I was 25, fresh out of business school with big dreams and even bigger student loans. He was this charming law student, 3 years older, who made me laugh and told me I could conquer the world. We had this tiny apartment in Brooklyn, and I remember thinking we were living our fairy tale. While he was grinding through his final year of law school, I was building my company in our spare bedroom. Connect Local started as just an idea. What if small businesses could connect with their local communities online without getting lost in the noise of big social media platforms? I worked 16-hour days, coding, designing, reaching out to potential clients. David said he was proud of me, but I could see the worry in his eyes when the bills piled up and my startup wasn't making money yet. He got a job at a mid-sized law firm after graduation, and suddenly we had steady income. I thought we were finally stable, finally ready to build the life we'd talked about. But success can reveal who people really are, and failure can do the same thing. The night I caught him cheating, I wasn't supposed to be home. I'd been at a client meeting that ended early, and I came back to surprise him with dinner from his favorite restaurant. Instead, I found him with Jessica, a paralegal from his office. They were in our bed in the home I'd worked so hard to help us afford. I'll never forget the look on his face when he saw me standing in the doorway. Not guilt, not shame, annoyance, like I was interrupting something that was none of my business. "Jasmine, I can explain," he said, but I was already grabbing my keys and walking out the door. The divorce was brutal. David tried to claim he deserved half of my company because he'd supported me while I built it. Never mind that I'd worked every single day while he was out having dinner with Jessica. Never mind that I'd sacrificed everything to build something from nothing. His lawyer argued that my business was marital property, and for months I thought I might lose everything I'd worked for. I had a complete breakdown. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on my business. I moved in with Lisa and spent 3 months on her couch, crying and wondering if I'd ever feel whole again. But slowly, with therapy and the love of friends who really cared about me, I started to rebuild. Not just my business, but myself. The irony is that losing David was the best thing that ever happened to my company. Without the distraction of trying to save a marriage that was already dead, I threw myself completely into Connect Local. Within 2 years, we had our first million users. Within 5 years, we were valued at over $1 billion. And now, 10 years later, I'm worth more than I ever dreamed possible. But money can't erase memories. And sometimes, the past has a way of showing up when you least expect it. Despite every instinct telling me to stay home, I decided to go to Lisa's wedding. This was about Despite every instinct telling me to stay home, I decided to go to Lisa's wedding. This was about celebrating my best friend, not about David. I wasn't going to let fear of seeing my ex-husband keep me from being there for one of the most important people in my life. The morning of the wedding, I stood in my walk-in closet staring at hundreds of options. This wasn't just about looking good, though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of it. This was about armor. I needed to feel powerful, confident, untouchable. I chose a deep emerald green silk dress, custom made by a designer whose waiting list was 2 years long. It fit like it was painted on, elegant but unmistakably expensive. My jewelry was simple but stunning, diamond earrings that caught the light with every movement, and my grandmother's pearl bracelet for luck. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. 10 years ago, I would have agonized over what to wear, worried about whether I looked good enough, whether people would judge me. Now I looked like exactly what I was, a woman who had built an empire from nothing and wasn't apologizing for it. The wedding was at this beautiful vineyard upstate, the kind of place you see in magazines. I pulled up in my Tesla, understated but unmistakably high-end, and handed my keys to the valet. The ceremony was outdoors, with white roses everywhere and string lights that would look magical once the sun went down. Lisa looked absolutely radiant in her dress, and for a moment I forgot all about my own drama. This was her day, her happiness, and I was genuinely thrilled to be there. But then came the cocktail hour, and that's when everything changed. I was talking to Lisa's cousin about my latest charity project when I felt someone's eyes on me. You know that feeling, right? When you can sense someone watching you even across a crowded room. I turned around slowly, and there he was. David looked older, obviously. His hairline had receded, and he'd put on weight around his middle. He was wearing a suit that looked expensive but didn't fit quite right, like he'd bought it off the rack instead of having it tailored. But what struck me most was his expression. He looked shocked, like he'd seen a ghost, which in a way I guess he had. I felt my stomach drop, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'd known this moment might come. I'd prepared for it mentally, emotionally. But nothing really prepares you for seeing the person who broke your heart standing 20 feet away, staring at you like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. He started walking toward me, and I watched him cross the room like it was happening in slow motion. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face neutral. I wasn't that 25-year-old girl anymore crying on Lisa's couch. I was Jasmine Thompson, CEO and founder of Connect Local, worth $3 billion, and I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel small ever again. Jasmine, he said when he reached me, his voice uncertain. Wow, you look incredible. I could smell his cologne, the same one he'd worn when we were married, and for a second I was transported back to our tiny Brooklyn apartment. But I pushed that feeling down deep. Hello, David, I said, my voice steady and polite. How are you? Such simple words, but they carried the weight of 10 years of silence between us. The conversation that followed was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. David kept staring at me like he couldn't quite process what he was seeing. I guess the last time he'd seen me, I was a broken woman fighting for half of a startup that might never succeed. Now I was standing in front of him wearing a dress that cost more than most people make in a month, radiating the kind of confidence that only comes from knowing you've conquered every obstacle life threw at you. So, he said, clearing his throat, I heard about your company. Connect Local, right? That's really something, Jasmine. I always knew you had it in you. The awkwardness in his voice was painful to hear. I wondered if he remembered telling me during our divorce that I was living in a fantasy and that my business would never amount to anything. Thank you, I said simply. I wasn't going to make this easy for him, but I wasn't going to be cruel either. Before he could say anything else, a woman appeared at his side. Jessica, she looked exactly like I remembered, blonde, petite, with that practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes, but now there were lines around those eyes and her smile seemed strained. Jessica, I said, nodding politely. It's good to see you. It wasn't, but my mama raised me to have manners. She looked me up and down, taking in every detail of my appearance, and I could see the calculations happening behind her eyes. The dress, the jewelry, the confidence, she was adding it all up and realizing that the woman her husband had left behind was nothing like the woman standing in front of her now. Jasmine, she said, her voice tight, you look different. That was one way to put it. What happened next was fascinating to watch. David started talking, and I could hear the desperation creeping into his voice. He told me about his career, how the law firm had restructured, and he'd been let go 2 years ago. He mentioned that he was between opportunities right now, which was a fancy way of saying unemployed. Jessica's face got tighter with every word, and I realized this wasn't information she wanted me to have. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. As the evening went on, I overheard bits and pieces of conversations. David and Jessica arguing in hushed tones by the bar, Something about mortgage payments and Jessica's father cutting them off. Later, Lisa pulled me aside and told me what she'd heard, that David and Jessica were facing foreclosure on their house, that Jessica's family money had dried up after some bad investments, and that they were essentially broke. The woman who had helped destroy my marriage, who I'd once seen as having everything I wanted, was now struggling financially while I was worth billions. If you'd told me 10 years ago that this day would come, I never would have believed it. But standing there watching them whisper frantically to each other across the room, I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. Instead, I felt something I didn't expect: pity. Later, during dinner, David approached me again. This time, Jessica wasn't with him. "Jasmine," he said, "could we talk?" Privately, against my better judgment, I followed him to a quiet corner of the reception hall. What he said next shocked me to my core. "I know I have no right to ask you this," he began, "but I'm in trouble, we're in trouble. Jessica and I were about to lose our house, and I was wondering if you might consider a business loan. I know it sounds crazy, but you're the only person I know who." He trailed off, probably seeing the expression on my face. I stared at him for a long moment. This was the man who had cheated on me, who had tried to take half my company in our divorce, who had told me I was delusional for believing in my dreams, and now he was asking me for money. The audacity of it was breathtaking. Before I could respond to David's shocking request, Jessica appeared. She'd obviously been looking for him, and when she saw us talking in the corner, her whole demeanor changed. She marched over with a look in her eyes that I remembered from 10 years ago: territorial, possessive, and ready for a fight. "What's going on here?" she demanded, looking back and forth between David and me. "David, what are you doing?" The panic in her voice was obvious. She knew exactly what he was doing, and she was terrified it might actually work. David looked embarrassed, like a child caught doing something wrong. "Jessica, calm down, we were just talking." But Jessica wasn't having it. She turned to me with a sneer that revealed who she really was underneath all that fake politeness. "Let me guess," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You think because you got lucky with some little tech company, you're better than everyone else now? You think you can just waltz back into our lives with your fancy dress and your attitude?" I felt something shift inside me. All the therapy, all the personal growth, all the work I'd done to become a better version of myself, none of that meant I had to stand there and let this woman disrespect me. Especially not this woman who had helped destroy my marriage and was now acting like I was the problem. "Jessica," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I didn't waltz into anything. I was invited to celebrate my best friend's wedding. You and David approached me, not the other way around. And as for my little tech company, it's valued at over $3 billion and employs 12,000 people worldwide. So yes, I suppose I am doing pretty well for myself." The look on her face was priceless. David looked mortified, like he wanted to disappear into the floor, but I wasn't done yet. "Now, if you'll excuse me," I continued, "I have an announcement to make." I walked away from them and back toward the main reception area, leaving them standing there in stunned silence. Lisa was just finishing her maid of honor speech when I approached the microphone. She looked surprised but handed it over with a smile. "I hope you don't mind," I said to the crowd, "but I have some news I'd like to share with everyone, especially Lisa, who's been like a sister to me through everything." The room went quiet, and I could see David and Jessica watching from the back, their faces pale. "6 months ago," I said, "I got engaged to the most wonderful man in the world, Dr. Michael Johnson, and I are planning a spring wedding, and Lisa, I hope you'll be my maid of honor." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Lisa screamed and ran over to hug me, demanding to see the ring I'd been hiding all evening. But I wasn't finished. "And," I said, waiting for the noise to die down, "we're also expecting our first child. I'm 3 months pregnant, and I've never been happier in my life." The room exploded again. People were coming up to congratulate me, asking about Michael, wanting to know when the baby was due. In all the excitement, I caught a glimpse of David's face across the room. He looked like someone had hit him with a truck. Jessica was pulling on his arm, trying to get him to leave, but he couldn't seem to move. Later, as the evening was winding down, I found Lisa for one last private moment. "I'm so happy for you," she said, tears in her eyes. "Both about Michael and the baby, and just seeing you like this, you're glowing, Jasmine, you're finally free." And she was right. Standing there in that beautiful vineyard, surrounded by people who loved and supported me, I realized that I was completely, truly free. Free from the pain David had caused me, free from the anger I'd carried for so long, free from the need to prove anything to anyone. As I walked to my car at the end of the night, David called out to me one last time. "Jasmine, wait." I turned around, and he was standing there alone, looking lost and defeated. "I just want you to know," he said, "I'm sorry for everything. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that I realize what I lost, what I threw away." I looked at him for a long moment, this man who had once been my whole world, who had broken my heart so completely I thought I'd never recover. And I felt nothing, no anger, no satisfaction, no desire for revenge, just nothing. I forgive you, David, I said quietly. Not for you, but for me. I needed to let go of that anger to become who I am today, so thank you in a way for setting me free to find my real life. And then I got in my car and drove away, leaving the past exactly where it belonged. The drive home gave me time to think about everything that had happened. 10 years ago, if someone had told me that I'd one day be worth billions of dollars, engaged to an amazing man, and expecting a baby, I would have laughed through my tears and told them they were crazy. Back then, sitting on Lisa's couch, crying over a man who had betrayed me, I couldn't imagine ever being happy again. But here's what I learned that night, and what I want you to understand. Healing isn't about getting revenge on the people who hurt you. It's not about proving them wrong or showing them what they lost. Real healing happens when you stop caring about any of that and start living for yourself. David asked me for money that night, and Jessica tried to tear me down with her jealousy and bitterness. But neither of those things touched me because I'm not the same person they hurt 10 years ago. I'm not seeking their approval or their regret. I don't need them to acknowledge my success for it to be real. My real victory isn't my bank account or my company's valuation. It's Michael, who loves me exactly as I am and supports my dreams without trying to diminish them. It's the baby growing inside me, who will be raised by parents who choose each other every single day. It's the peace I feel when I wake up in the morning, knowing that I'm living a life that's authentically mine. I used to think that success meant proving the people who doubted me wrong. Now I know that real success means building a life so fulfilling that you forget they ever doubted you in the first place. David and Jessica are struggling now, and while I felt a moment of pity for them, their problems aren't mine to solve. I'm not responsible for fixing the consequences of their choices, just like they're not responsible for my success. The woman who walked into that wedding reception is not the same woman who left. I went there carrying the weight of old pain, wondering if seeing David would set me back somehow. Instead, I left feeling lighter than I had in years, finally understanding that the best revenge really is living well, but the best life is one where you don't need revenge at all. Sometimes the best revenge is living well, but the best life is one where you don't need revenge at all. If this story resonated with you, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't defined by who left them. And remember, your comeback is always stronger than your setback. Subscribe for more real stories about love, loss, and the strength we find within ourselves. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.